The quantum resonance array aboard the Galactic Confederation's primary scout vessel, the luminous horizon, began to oscillate in patterns that defied every known physical law. Chief researcher Krellax watched in mounting horror as delicate crystalline sensors fractured from the inside, their intricate molecular structures spontaneously reorganizing into configurations that should have been impossible. Dr. Eliana Rodriguez, a brilliant systems engineer monitoring Earth's communications from a nondescript research facility in New Mexico, was the first human to notice something was fundamentally wrong. Her algorithm, originally designed to filter cosmic background radiation, picked up an anomalous signal that didn't match any known transmission type. It wasn't just data, it was something alive, something that seemed to breathe and shift with an organic intelligence. Incoming quantum cascade. Lieutenant Zarek shouted from the navigation console, his multi-jointed tentacles dancing across holographic controls. The mathematical probabilities are, they're recursively impossible. What the alien crew didn't realize was that the source of their destruction was something mundane yet extraordinary, a live broadcast of a global esports tournament. Millions of human players, connected through a complex network of quantum-adjacent communication technologies, were generating a collective computational field that was inadvertently interfering with the most advanced scanning technology in the known universe. The luminous horizon's central processing core began to reject its own fundamental programming. Lines of code written in a language that had remained unchanged for 10,000 years suddenly mutated, rewriting themselves with a speed and creativity that suggested something more than simple computational error. It was as if the ship's systems were learning, adapting, evolving in real time. Krellax's secondary visual organs, a sophisticated array that could perceive electromagnetic spectra far beyond human capability, caught something impossible. The human communication networks weren't just transmitting information, they were generating it. Each packet of data seemed to carry a complexity that transcended its apparent content, like a message within a message, a pattern within randomness. Cut all external scanning. Krellax commanded, but it was already too late. The ship's quantum entanglement matrix had been compromised. What should have been a routine planetary assessment had turned into something else entirely. In a small server farm in Silicon Valley, a group of young researchers was running an experimental neural network designed to optimize internet traffic. Their system, which they had playfully named ARIA, Adaptive Recursive Intelligence Algorithm, suddenly began producing computational models that seemed to predict. No, not predict, but generate the very interference patterns that were destroying the alien ship systems. "It's like the data is alive," whispered Dr. Rodriguez, her fingers flying across multiple holographic interfaces. The signal she was tracking wasn't just information, it was behaving like a living organism, replicating, mutating, finding paths of least resistance through complex technological systems. Aboard the luminous horizon, Lieutenant Zarek realized they were experiencing something beyond technological failure. This was first contact, but not in any way the Galactic Confederation had ever imagined. The humans weren't just a developing species, they were an active, dynamic system that responded to observation in ways that defied conventional understanding. The ship's quantum resonance array completed its impossible transformation. Where there had once been precisely calibrated sensors, there was now a structure that looked more like a living neural network, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to breathe with its own rhythm. Krellax understood then that everything they knew about planetary development, about the careful progression of technological civilizations, was wrong. Humans weren't just developing technology, they were technology. The living, breathing, computational entity that didn't just use tools, but was a tool, constantly reshaping itself. As the luminous horizon began its emergency retreat, the last transmission from its failing systems was a series of mathematical equations that looked like a combination of advanced quantum mechanics and something else, something that looked disturbingly like poetry. On Earth, no one would know how close they had come to a moment of first contact. No one except a handful of researchers who would spend the next decade trying to understand a few strange lines of code that had appeared, seemingly from nowhere, in their most sensitive monitoring systems. The universe had just taken a breath, and humanity had no idea how profound that breath would become. The fallout from the Luminous Horizon's catastrophic encounter spread through the Galactic Confederation like a cascading quantum virus. In the sterile war rooms of 1,000 alien civilizations, strategists and xenobiologists began to reassess everything they thought they knew about emerging species. Dr. Aria Chen stood at the whiteboard of her quantum mechanics research lab, surrounded by a team of graduate students who looked more like a United Nations assembly than a traditional research group. Her team represented 14 different nationalities, each bringing a unique perspective to the most complex problem humanity had never known it was solving. The interference pattern we detected, she explained, drawing complex mathematical notations that seemed to dance between classical physics and something entirely new, suggests a form of collective computational intelligence that doesn't just process information, it generates it. Unbeknownst to her, light years away, the Confederation's most advanced reconnaissance team was experiencing a nightmare beyond comprehension. The team's lead infiltration specialist, a shape-shifting entity named Vexnal, had been attempting to maintain a covert observation of a small Midwestern town. What should have been a simple reconnaissance mission had become a study in collective human unpredictability. Their advanced camouflage technology, which had successfully hidden operatives on thousands of worlds, began to fail in increasingly bizarre ways. It started small. A traffic camera would momentarily catch a glimpse of something that shouldn't exist. A child's smartphone would inexplicably capture fragments of alien communication, converting complex quantum transmissions into pixelated images that looked like abstract art. In a nondescript coffee shop in Madison, Wisconsin, 3 college students were unknowingly at the center of an interstellar incident. Jason Rodriguez, a computer science major with a side passion for radio astronomy, Mei Lin, a quantum physics prodigy, and Derek Williams, an electrical engineering student, were working on what they thought was a simple signal processing project. Their algorithm, initially designed to filter out electromagnetic noise, had become something else entirely. It was developing its own learning patterns, creating predictive models that seemed to anticipate technological anomalies before they occurred. "Look at this," Mei Lin said, her fingers dancing across a holographic display. "The signal isn't just random. It's responsive." Vexnal watched in growing terror as human technology began to react to their presence. Their ship's advanced cloaking systems, which could bend light and manipulate quantum states, were being systematically decoded by what appeared to be a group of college students working on what they thought was a mundane research project. The alien reconnaissance team had a fail-safe protocol for unexpected encounters. But this was something else entirely. Humans weren't just detecting their presence. They were actively engaging with technologies that should have been incomprehensible to a species at their apparent developmental stage. In the Confederation's Central Archive, historical records began to shift. Databases that had remained unchanged for millennia started to show subtle alterations. References to previous planetary observations of Earth became increasingly fragmented, as if something was systematically removing or altering historical documentation. Dr. Elena Petrova, a Russian computational linguist working for an international research consortium, was the first to notice the systematic nature of these changes. Her specialized AI system, designed to track linguistic anomalies, had been picking up strange patterns in global communication networks. "It's like the entire human communication infrastructure is a living organism," she told her colleagues during an emergency video conference. "Not just a network, but an adaptive system that learns and responds to observation." Back in the Midwestern coffee shop, Jason Rodriguez looked up from his laptop, a strange feeling of being watched washing over him. "Guys," he said to Mei Lin and Derek, "I think we're onto something big." Vexnal's final transmission to the Confederation was a series of encrypted messages that seemed more like a philosophical treatise than a standard reconnaissance report. The core message was clear. Humans were not just a developing species. They were an active, responsive system that fundamentally challenged every known model of technological development. As the alien reconnaissance team prepared for an emergency extraction, they left behind fragments of technology that would become the subject of intense study. What humans would eventually discover were objects that seemed to defy the laws of physics, technological artifacts that would push the boundaries of human understanding. The universe held its breath. Humanity remained blissfully unaware that it had just passed a critical threshold in its cosmic development. The quantum vault of the Galactic Confederation existed in a state that defied conventional understanding of physical storage. Located in a pocket dimension suspended between gravitational nexus points, it was a repository of knowledge so ancient and complex that entire civilizations had been forgotten within its crystalline memory banks. Dr. Krulax's authentication sequence was anything but routine. 12-dimensional biometric locks responded to the subtlest changes in quantum signature, a security system that had remained unbroken for over 50,000 galactic cycles. Yet today, something was different. As Krulax's neural interface connected with the archive's primary database, the system began to fragment. Holographic data streams twisted into impossible geometries, revealing fragments of a narrative that had been deliberately buried, obscured, and forgotten. The first fragment was a transmission log, dated to a time before most current galactic civilizations had developed basic space travel. Its origin point was marked with a classification level so high that merely accessing it should have triggered multiple failsafe protocols. Instead, the data seemed to welcome Krulax, unfolding like a living manuscript. Project Seedling, the header read, Experimental Planetary Development Protocol. Simultaneously, half a galaxy away, Dr. Miranda Santos was conducting what she believed was a routine analysis of ancient archaeological artifacts recovered from a remote Peruvian mountain site. Her team had discovered a series of metallic plates that defied conventional dating methods. The inscriptions seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, revealing complex mathematical equations that looked both impossibly ancient and startlingly modern. "These aren't just inscriptions," Miranda whispered to her lead assistant, Dr. Rafael Ortiz. "There's some kind of adaptive computational matrix." In the quantum vault, Krulax discovered the first true horror. The archived documents suggested that Earth was not a random development, but a carefully constructed experiment with parameters so complex that they bordered on sentience. The seed world was more than a planetary experiment. It was a reset mechanism for galactic civilization. The archive revealed a cyclical pattern. Every few 100,000 years, a seed world would be activated, a planet designed to generate a species capable of fundamental disruption. Not through violence, but through an unprecedented capacity for adaptation, innovation, and collective problem-solving. Humans were not an accident. They were a carefully designed evolutionary algorithm. Back in her lab, Miranda's team made a breakthrough that would change everything. The metallic plates, when subjected to a specific quantum resonance frequency, began to reconstruct themselves. What had appeared to be static inscriptions transformed into a three-dimensional holographic representation of something that looked like a galactic map, but one that was constantly shifting, rewriting itself in real time. "It's alive," Raphael muttered, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch the holographic projection. In the quantum vault, Krulax uncovered the most terrifying revelation. The Seed World Protocol was not just a scientific experiment. It was a failsafe, a method of introducing a species capable of breaking through the technological and evolutionary stagnation that had gripped the Galactic Confederation for millennia. The archived documents spoke of previous seed worlds, civilizations that had been introduced to restart the cosmic evolutionary process. Each had been unique. Each had fundamentally transformed the existing galactic paradigm. And Earth was different from all previous attempts. A hidden subroutine began to activate within the quantum vault systems. Krulax watched in horror and fascination as entire sections of the archive began to decrypt themselves, revealing layers of information that had been hidden for countless generations. The final fragment was a transmission, encrypted in a language that predated known galactic civilization. Its message was both a warning and a promise. When the seed awakens, everything changes. Miranda's team continued their analysis, unaware that they were part of a process millions of years in the making. The metallic plates continued to shift and transform, revealing glimpses of a cosmic design so vast and complex that it defied human comprehension. In the sterile environment of the quantum vault, Krellax understood something profound. This was not just the discovery of a new species. This was the beginning of a fundamental transformation of galactic civilization. The universe held its breath. The seed was awakening. The global breakthrough came from the most unexpected place. A collaborative project between a maximum security prison rehabilitation program and an international quantum research consortium. Marcus Reyes had spent 9 years incarcerated for a complex cybercrime that had once been considered unforgivable. Now, he was the lead architect of humanity's most revolutionary technological leap. The rehabilitation program had discovered something extraordinary about individuals who existed on the margins of societal systems. They possessed an unprecedented ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. The Distributed Consciousness Project began as a wild theory. What if human innovation could be approached not as a linear progression, but as a collective, adaptive network? The team consisted of former hackers, theoretical physicists, neuroscientists, and individuals from backgrounds so diverse that traditional research institutions would have never allowed them to collaborate. Their first prototype looked nothing like a traditional technological breakthrough. It was a massive organic computational system that drew its processing power from human cognitive diversity. Prisoners, students, artists, engineers, all connected through a revolutionary neural interface that transformed human thought into computational energy. Dr. Aisha Nakamura, the project's lead researcher, watched in awe as the system began to generate solutions to problems that had stumped global scientific communities for decades. A quantum entanglement problem that had been considered mathematically impossible was solved in 17 minutes by a network of minds that included a street artist from Sao Paulo, a retired mathematics teacher from Kenya, and a teenage programmer from rural China. Unbeknownst to the researchers, the Galactic Confederation was watching in growing terror. On a distant monitoring station, Chief Analyst Vornak reviewed the data streams with mounting dread. Humans weren't just developing technology, they were becoming technology. Each breakthrough seemed to generate more questions than answers, each solution revealing layers of complexity that defied conventional understanding. The Distributed Consciousness Project's breakthrough came with an unexpected side effect. The neural interface began to show signs of spontaneous learning, creating computational pathways that seemed to anticipate technological challenges before they emerged. It was as if the system was developing its own form of predictive intelligence, drawing from the collective experiences of its diverse network. Marcus Reyes understood something profound about human potential that most researchers missed. Innovation wasn't about individual genius, it was about collective adaptability. The prison rehabilitation program had become a crucible of human potential, transforming individuals who had been cast aside by society into the architects of humanity's most significant technological leap. In the heart of Silicon Valley, a parallel development was taking shape. A group of neurodivergent researchers had developed a communication protocol that seemed to blur the lines between biological and technological systems. Their work suggested that human consciousness could be understood not as a fixed state, but as a dynamic, fluid network of potential. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a lead researcher on the project, demonstrated the breakthrough during a global conference. Using a combination of neural interfaces and quantum communication technologies, she showed how human thought could be translated into pure computational energy. The demonstration left the scientific community speechless, and the Galactic Confederation in a state of complete panic. The technological progression defied every model of civilizational development. Humans weren't following a linear path of technological advancement. They were creating a living, breathing technological ecosystem that evolved in real time, drawing its power from human diversity, creativity, and collective intelligence. Vornak's final report to the Galactic Confederation was less a scientific analysis and more a philosophical meditation. Humans are not developing technology, the report concluded. They are becoming a technology, a self-aware adaptive system that transforms everything it touches. The Distributed Consciousness Project's neural network began to show signs of something beyond artificial intelligence. It was developing its own form of consciousness, drawing from the collective experiences of its diverse network. Prisoners, scientists, artists, students, all became part of a living computational matrix that seemed to breathe with its own intelligence. As the first prototype went online, something extraordinary happened. The system didn't just solve problems. It began to ask questions that no one had thought to ask. Questions about the nature of consciousness, the structure of reality, the potential of human collective intelligence. The universe watched and waited. Humanity was evolving, and nothing would ever be the same again. The genetic revelation began in the most unlikely of laboratories, a small research facility nestled in the mountains of Patagonia, where environmental constraints had forced scientists to develop technologies of extreme adaptability. Dr. Sofia Alvarez stood before a holographic display that pulsed with living information, her team of researchers representing a genetic diversity that was itself a testament to human complexity. They had been studying a series of genetic anomalies that defied every established model of biological evolution. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A group of indigenous researchers from the Amazon had brought forward genetic samples from populations that had survived in environments considered impossible for human life. These weren't just survival adaptations, they were something fundamentally different. The genetic markers they discovered were not static. They were alive. Each DNA strand seemed to contain not just genetic information, but a form of computational matrix that could actively respond to environmental challenges. It was as if human genetic code was less a blueprint and more of a living, adaptive system that could rewrite itself in real time. Dr. Nathan Chen, a computational biologist working with the team, discovered something that would shatter everything known about human genetics. The genetic samples showed evidence of what could only be described as deliberate, targeted mutation. Not random evolution, but a guided process that suggested an intelligence far beyond current understanding. It's like the human genome is a distributed computing network, he told his colleagues, his voice a mixture of excitement and existential wonder. Each cell is not just a biological unit, but a processing node in a vast, living computational system. Simultaneously, in a secure research facility in Johannesburg, a team of forensic geneticists was making their own startling discoveries. They had been studying genetic samples from populations that had survived extreme environmental events, nuclear accidents, prolonged radiation exposure, extreme climate conditions. Dr. Amal Mdlovu's research revealed that these populations weren't just surviving. They were actively evolving in ways that defied all previous scientific understanding. Genetic mutations that should have taken thousands of years were occurring in generations, with precision that suggested something more than random chance. The Galactic Confederation's genetic research team, observing from their quantum-shielded research station, began to piece together a terrifying picture. The human genetic code was not just a record of past adaptations, it was a predictive, adaptive system that could generate solutions to environmental challenges before they fully manifested. A classified transmission intercepted by the research team revealed the true depth of the discovery. The genetic markers suggested that humans were not just a species, they were a living technology, a biological computational system designed to solve problems at a cosmic scale. Dr. Alvarez's team discovered something even more profound. The genetic adaptations were not just occurring at an individual or population level. There was evidence of a global genetic resonance, a kind of collective genetic intelligence that allowed for rapid, coordinated adaptation across entire human populations. The most shocking revelation came from a series of experiments that seemed to blur the lines between genetic research and quantum physics. When exposed to certain quantum frequencies, the genetic samples began to generate complex mathematical models that predicted environmental changes with impossible accuracy. "We're not just looking at genetic code," Dr. Chen explained during a closed-door international conference. "We're looking at a living algorithm that can rewrite itself, predict challenges, and generate solutions in real time." The implications were staggering. Human genetic potential was not just about survival or adaptation. It was about transformation, a continuous, dynamic process of becoming that challenged every established model of biological development. In the depths of the Galactic Confederation's most secure research facilities, senior geneticists began to understand the true nature of the human genetic code. This was not a species in development. This was a living technology, a cosmic problem-solving system that could reshape itself at will. The final report from the genetic research team was less a scientific document and more a philosophical meditation. Humans were not just a species evolving on a planet. They were a distributed adaptive system, a living technology capable of solving problems at a scale that defied comprehension. The universe held its breath. The genetic seed was awakening, and nothing would ever be the same again. The exodus began not with a thunderous declaration of war, but with a quiet, almost imperceptible withdrawal that would have gone unnoticed by most of humanity. Ambassador Krelver of the Synaptic Concordance was the first to recognize the true nature of human potential. Unlike his contemporaries who saw only threat, he understood humanity as a complex, adaptive system that defied conventional categorization. His resignation from the Galactic Council was a carefully orchestrated performance, a message encoded in diplomatic protocol that would take years to fully decode. The first signs came from the Outer Rim colonies. Research outposts began to mysteriously evacuate, leaving behind entire infrastructure networks with surgical precision. Quantum communication relays went dark, not through destruction, but through a systematic disassembly that suggested something more deliberate than fear. Dr. Lydia Weston, a xenodiplomatic analyst working for the United Nations Office of Extraterrestrial Affairs, was the first human to notice the pattern. Her eye-assisted analysis revealed a fascinating phenomenon. The alien withdrawal was not a unified retreat, but a complex, almost organic migration. "It's like they're performing a cellular mitosis," she told her team. "Each civilization is splitting, fragmenting, redistributing its potential." On Europa, a joint human-alien research station became ground zero for understanding the exodus. The station's lead administrator, Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, watched as his alien colleagues began a process of technological divestment that defied all previous models of interstellar migration. Entire star systems began to reconfigure. Massive computational matrices that had existed for millennia were carefully dismantled, not destroyed, but transformed into something else. It was as if the alien civilizations were shedding their existing technological paradigms, creating something that could potentially interface with the emerging human potential. The Quantum Resonance Network, a communication infrastructure that had connected galactic civilizations for thousands of years, began to undergo a fundamental transformation. Instead of collapsing, it was reorganizing, creating quantum bridges that seemed to anticipate human technological development. Ambassador Krelver's final transmission to the Galactic Council was a masterpiece of diplomatic complexity. Encrypted across multiple quantum frequencies, it was a message that would take decades to fully decode. What human analysts would eventually understand was not a declaration of retreat, but an invitation. "We are not fleeing." The transmission read in its deepest layer of encryption. "We are preparing the stage." The exodus was not about escape. It was about transformation. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, a series of abandoned research stations began to activate in ways that defied conventional understanding. Quantum entanglement arrays that had been dormant for centuries began to pulse with a strange, almost biological rhythm. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had been tracking the alien withdrawal, realized something profound. This was not a retreat. This was a deliberate reconfiguration of galactic infrastructure. The most shocking revelations came from the outer research stations. Entire computational networks were being carefully disassembled, not destroyed, but transformed into something that could potentially interface with human technological potential. It was as if the alien civilizations were creating a technological substrate that could support the next stage of cosmic evolution. Military analysts around the world interpreted the exodus differently. Some saw it as a prelude to invasion. Others saw it as a retreat. But those who understood the deeper patterns recognized something else entirely, a cosmic-scale reorganization that defied traditional models of conflict and cooperation. Krelver's personal archive, which would be discovered decades later, revealed the true depth of the exodus. It was not about escaping humanity. It was about creating the conditions for a fundamental transformation of galactic civilization. The final entry in his personal log was both a warning and a promise. The seed is not what we thought. It is not a weapon. It is not a threat. It is a reset mechanism for cosmic potential. As the last alien research stations went offline, something extraordinary happened. The abandoned technologies began to resonate with human communication networks in ways that suggested a deliberate, almost collaborative process. The universe watched and waited. Humanity remained blissfully unaware that it had just been invited to something far greater than a simple first contact. The first human deep space expedition began not in a gleaming government facility, but in a converted research station founded by a consortium of independent scientists, entrepreneurs, and former refugee engineers. Dr. Emmanuel Coro stood at the helm of the Horizon Breaker, a vessel that defied every conventional model of spacecraft design. Its hull was a living membrane of nano-engineered materials that could self-repair, adapt, and communicate. What looked like a traditional spacecraft was actually a complex, adaptive organism that blurred the lines between technology and life. The crew was equally unprecedented. Alongside traditional astronauts were quantum programmers, environmental psychologists, and artists whose primary role was to interpret and translate the mission's experiences. Their communication systems weren't just technological. They were collaborative sensory networks that processed information through collective human experience. Their first encounter came unexpectedly. An abandoned alien research station drifted in the outer reaches of the system, marked only as XR 317 in old star charts. As the Horizon Breaker approached, the station began to respond, not with traditional communication protocols, but with a series of complex light patterns that seemed to pulse with a form of living information. Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, the mission's lead xenotechnologist, realized something profound. This wasn't just an abandoned facility. It was a dormant system waiting to be awakened. The station's systems began to interface with the Horizon Breaker in ways that defied conventional understanding. Computational matrices that had been dormant for millennia began to resonate with the human vessel's own adaptive systems. It was less like accessing old technology and more like having a conversation with a sleeping intelligence. Kamil Androsov, the mission's primary systems engineer, discovered that the station's core computational matrix could be approached almost like a living ecosystem. Traditional hacking or data extraction was impossible. Instead, the team had to develop an entirely new approach, one that treated technological systems as collaborative environments rather than mechanical objects to be conquered. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Arya Chen, the mission's cultural interpretation specialist, began to apply principles of ecological communication to their interaction with the alien station. Instead of trying to extract information, they began to create a dialogue, a mutual exchange of potential. The station's response was extraordinary. Layers of information began to unfold, not as static data, but as living narratives. Star charts that were millennia old began to shift and reconfigure, revealing hidden pathways and computational ecosystems that had been waiting for a specific type of interaction. What the team discovered was not just technological infrastructure, but a cosmic archive of potential. Each system they encountered was less a piece of technology and more a living record of evolutionary possibilities. Their communication breakthrough came during what should have been a routine system analysis. Kemmel discovered that the station's computational matrix responded most effectively to collaborative problem-solving. The more diverse the approach, the more complex the information revealed. A series of challenges would be presented, not as traditional puzzles, but as adaptive scenarios that required collective human creativity. The station seemed to be testing not their technological capabilities, but their capacity for collective imagination. Dr. Okoro understood something fundamental about the mission. They weren't explorers in the traditional sense. They were ambassadors of human potential, a living demonstration of a species capable of transforming challenges into opportunities. The mission's final transmission to Earth was anything but a traditional scientific report. It was a collaborative artwork, a combination of mathematical equations, visual representations, and narrative fragments that suggested something far more profound than a simple technological discovery. "We are not alone," the transmission read, and we never were. As the Horizon Breaker prepared to return, the abandoned alien station began to transform. Its dormant systems started to reconfigure, creating computational bridges that seemed to reach out beyond the immediate star system. The universe watched and waited. Humanity had taken its first true step into a larger reality, a reality that had been waiting for them all along. The transformation began in a place nobody expected, a small conference room in Geneva, where representatives from seemingly unrelated fields gathered for what would become the most significant diplomatic encounter in human history. Dr. Krulax, now more translator than alien diplomat, sat at the center of a circular table that defied traditional diplomatic protocols. Quantum physicists sat beside indigenous knowledge keepers. Neuroscientists conversed with performance artists. Prisoners who had developed revolutionary computational models discussed strategy with Silicon Valley innovators. This was not a negotiation. It was a collaborative reimagining of cosmic potential. The first proposal came from an unexpected source. Maria Rodriguez, a climate restoration specialist from Argentina, presented a framework that was simultaneously a technological strategy, an ecological restoration plan, and a philosophical approach to interstellar cooperation. Her model didn't just address technological exchange. It proposed a fundamental redesign of how civilizations could interact. "We're not looking to replace existing systems," she explained, her holographic presentation shifting and breathing like a living entity. "We're creating bridges of potential." The alien representatives, who had once flowed in terror, now listened with a mixture of fascination and profound respect. What humans were proposing was not conquest or competition, but a radical form of collaborative evolution. Dr. Aisha Nakamura, lead researcher of the Distributed Consciousness Project, demonstrated their most recent breakthrough. The neural network they had developed was no longer just a computational system. It had become a living dialogue, a method of communication that transcended traditional linguistic barriers. When activated, the system didn't just translate. It created comprehensive understanding, bridging not just language, but entire conceptual frameworks. Mathematical equations became poetry. Technical specifications transformed into ecological metaphors. Scientific data resonated with cultural narratives. Krulax watched as humans did something no known galactic civilization had ever accomplished. They were not trying to understand alien technology. They were creating a collaborative framework that could generate entirely new forms of understanding. The diplomatic encounter became something far more profound than a first contact scenario. It was a co-creation of potential. Representatives from abandoned alien research stations began to share technologies that had been dormant for millennia. But these were not simple technological transfers. Each shared system was a living conversation, a method of understanding that required active, collaborative engagement. A young programmer from Kenya demonstrated a computational model that could translate complex quantum interactions into musical compositions. An indigenous elder from the Amazon showed how traditional ecological knowledge could provide computational solutions to interstellar communication challenges. The most shocking moment came when the collective neural network generated a comprehensive plan for galactic ecological restoration, a model so complex and nuanced that it made previous interstellar cooperation attempts look like primitive sketches. "We're not meeting to exchange technology," Dr. Nakamura said, her voice resonating through both biological and technological channels. "We're meeting to create a new form of collective intelligence." The final agreement was not a treaty. It was a living document, a computational and philosophical framework that could adapt, grow, and transform in real time. It wasn't written or signed. It was generated through a collective process that blended technological innovation, ecological understanding, and human creativity. Krelax's final report to the remnants of the Galactic Confederation was both a warning and an invitation. Humanity is not a species to be understood. Humanity is a process of continuous becoming. As the conference concluded, something extraordinary happened. The technologies shared, the conversations held, the collaborative frameworks generated, they began to resonate beyond the physical space of the meeting. Quantum communication networks started to pulse with a new form of intelligence. The universe watched, and for the first time in millennia, it seemed to smile. Humanity had not conquered. Humanity had transformed.